I'm Frankie Frayne. A small group of people on the internet know me as a filmmaker and YouTube content creator, most notably for producing and co-hosting a show in which my friend and I review, of all things, boxed macaroni and cheese from around the world. On June 13th, 2020, I weighed myself at 289 pounds and embarked on a massive weight loss effort with a goal end weight of 150 pounds. At the time of this video, a year later, I've reached that goal. I'm going to be detailing the weight loss for you, which is going to come with anecdotes and suggestions. And I just want to be clear that I did not do this under the guidance of a doctor, and I'm far from an expert myself, so this is just purely what worked for me. So if you're just interested in how one guy turned COVID into a weight loss marathon, let's get into it. I have a good life. I have an amazing wife and daughter. I've found a tremendous amount of creative fulfillment through our film projects. I have a cool career, and I've never struggled with substance abuse. In fact, I've never had a sip of alcohol or tried any illicit drug ever. But I have been struggling with weight gain and fitness since probably my late teens. As a child, I wasn't inclined towards athletics. I played Little League basketball, but sucked at it and didn't find it fun. I wasn't really built in mind or in body for team sports, but I did take to running to some extent, which the Rocky films turned me onto, and to which my dad pushed me.
How are you gonna run, Frank?
Gonna do the best I can.
Oh boy, that's my son. Good luck to you.
Thank you. Bye.
We would regularly run road races, and when I reached middle and high school, I ran cross country and track. I was really small in my running years and got pretty fast for a shorter guy. When I was 13, I ran a half marathon in an hour and 42 minutes. When I was 15, I ran the indoor track 2 mile in 12 minutes and 6 seconds. I ran a 5:30 mile. I broke 20 minutes for a 5K, and the list goes on. Until I joined the track team, I remember getting teased a lot for running, probably because it was unusual for an 11-year-old to run road races every weekend. And it's an exhausting sport that leaves you sore most days. And also, this was before MP3 players and Bluetooth headphones, so it was often boring. But other times, running was an adventure. For a few years, I joined a running camp in Newport, Rhode Island, where we would do grueling runs, weights, ab drills 3 times a day. There's like a military aspect to it, where they'd bang on our doors at 5 a.m. and we'd run before the sun came up. Then we'd have a big monstrous breakfast before doing hill work or high knees or some kind of other drill for another hour. Then we'd pig out again and run 10 miles at 3 p.m. and pass out at 8 p.m. I ran up Mount Washington one year. Another year I dehydrated in Vermont and got rushed to a hospital. I placed in the 12 and under division at almost every race. And while it wasn't my ideal activity for when the bell rang, high school track offered the kinds of community and friendships and memories that come with team sports. Had I not run on the track team, I would not have met John Hunt, my BoxMac co-host. His sister actually was a teammate, and after we became friends, she said, "My brother would get a kick out of you." Being both young and constantly active, I really didn't have to consider my eating habits too much. But I also didn't drive at that age, and my parents were extremely committed to fitness and healthy eating, so there was virtually no way I was going to be overweight during childhood. But as soon as I had my own money, my own transportation, and an option to quit the track team, which I did by junior year, I felt extremely liberated. Running had its share of cool experiences, but it simply wasn't important to me. I was falling in love with film and filmmaking, and I had a girlfriend. My friends wanted to go out to eat all the time, and it wasn't at all unusual to eat out 3 or 4 times a weekend at pizza places or Friendlies or buffets. I think I went from 140 to 180 pounds in the span of about 2 years, which is a considerable weight gain in a short time, but not enough to be alarming. And at 180, I didn't feel particularly unhealthy. If anything, I felt like my physical profile was more in line with the kinds of artists and filmmakers I wanted to emulate. I wanted to be Peter Jackson, not Frank Shorter. During this time, I made my first feature film, I Need to Lose 10 Pounds, which was a musical comedy and about 70% fat jokes. The bad habits obviously worsened through college, where every meal is all you can eat and every social event has junk food. I would hit the gym or try to go on a failed run very occasionally, but never mounted much of an effort. I went to Los Angeles in 2007 for an internship program where I found myself lonely and depressed and eating worse than ever, and I returned to Massachusetts weighing 238 pounds, which panicked me. Throughout 2008, I started counting calories. I ate a bowl of cereal in the morning, normally Special K or Cinnamon Life, a lean cuisine for lunch, and a 600-calorie dinner. landing me at about 1,200 calories a day.
That is Frankie Frayne. He has since lost about 80 pounds.
Which is amazing.
That is the fattest he's ever been, and it's wonderful to treasure it on film.
My wife Nina, who was my girlfriend at the time, had lost about 50 pounds while I was in LA, and she had turned me onto the elliptical as a fairly easy and low-impact way to fit in exercise. I also started a fairly serious weightlifting regimen and found myself in the work gym every morning for years. I got down to 170 by 2009, and by that point, Nina had really fallen in love with running, a sport she couldn't have been less interested in when we were in high school. So we ran together for years, though I dropped off around 2014 or so, and she continued stronger than ever, running a half marathon per month. I made 2 feature films during that time, while getting my master's and working my first full-time job, which led to 2 major promotions that expanded my responsibilities well beyond 5 o'clock. My dedication to fitness started to slip. I would surrender to food temptation more often than not. I'd miss days at the gym. You know how it goes. Now, when I started losing weight in 2008, John had begun a weight loss effort as well, and by 2010, he was 238, having lost over 250 pounds. For years, we had met every Sunday to have a healthy meal and discuss weight loss goals, but around 2012 or so, he too had started to slip, and we just didn't check each other enough. Those healthy meals became pleasure meals, and perhaps worst of all, we stopped weighing ourselves, which I believe was the death knell. By the time we started to make Box Mac in 2015, he was back to a size that was distracting for a lot of new viewers, and I was fat enough to attract regular comments about how we were both killing ourselves and maybe you should make a show where you review salads and that sort of thing. We would acknowledge some of the comments on the show to make sure people knew we weren't delusional, both about our weights and also the self-exploitative nature of doing a mac and cheese show. A lot of comments about our general overweightness.
Oh yeah, well...
more geared towards you than to me, but
clearly.
I got my share as well.
Yeah.
Comments range from both concern trolling to downright contempt. We were lucky that the majority of the fans who stuck around weren't hung up on it. In fact, from what I can tell, a lot of our fans are overweight, and I suspect that for many, at least John modeled someone funny and smart and multidimensional, where his weight wasn't his defining characteristic. But whenever a video would attract a larger audience, the fat comments would come pouring in again, which was disheartening. Certainly, we weren't putting in all this effort to be insulted. And it messes with your self-image a lot, where you're left wondering just how hideous you really are and how many people think so. But I actually did lose about 40 pounds in the early episodes, coming down to like 206, in which John, Nina, and a few coworkers and I would take pictures of everything we ate and post them to a Slack channel. It was around this time that I saw the weight loss journey videos of Cool Duder, Sean C. Phillips, a content creator and actor who was often cast for his big guy look, but who had a terrible health scare that inspired him to lose 300 pounds, all of which he's kept off to this day.
Basically, I went to the hospital because I got cellulitis, which is a kind of a rash in my leg. For some reason, I really thought that I was going to die that night. I know it was bad, but I had that kind of vibe. They were doing all these tests because I am the kind of person who never went to the doctor. I was scared shitless of the doctor. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to know my weight. I didn't want to face reality. And I didn't want to. I could not fucking face reality with how heavy I was.
I was never in as scary of a situation as that, but his struggle was relatable. And I remember being highly motivated at that time. And about a year later, I heard about Penn Jillette's Nutritarian mono meals, so I tried that to great effect as well, eating large plates of greens and things like sweet potatoes. I was doing well with that around episode 50 of Box Mac, where you might notice I look a little healthier than, for instance, a year later, when we were just days away from having our daughter. Around the time Gloria was born in 2017, I was juggling some major career changes and projects that were killing me, combined with my usual grueling commute to and from Boston, and I just lost all discipline. 2017 to 2020 is kind of a blur, to be honest. I don't really know how I let myself put on what must have been 80 pounds during that period, but I did. I was also not going to the doctor for annual physicals, and the worse my health got, the more determined I was to stay away, lest I be told something I didn't want to hear. My best effort during those years was fall 2018, where I did a half hour on the elliptical every morning for 100 days without exception, but I didn't adjust my eating at all and I stopped as soon as I reached day 100. Intermittent fasting and keto were starting to be all the rage, so on a number of occasions I tried things like Banana Island, where you just eat bananas for 2 weeks and then transition to a fruits and veggies diet, or a carnivore diet where all the hot dogs you want are fine as long as you don't have any rice. Or more modestly, I tried having just one large burrito bowl for lunch and otherwise not eat. Look, I'm not stupid. I knew all of these were stunts, but I just wanted to shed 10 to 20 pounds rapidly to gain some momentum for a more permanent routine. I will say, doing zero carbs with high protein is intriguing. I experienced better mental acuity, less exhaustion, better sleep, and other intangibles. In January of 2020, I lost 20 pounds through intermittent fasting. But by February, I got very sick with a cough and a fever that came and went, and this derailed the whole effort. The coughing and congestion lasted for 2 months, and still, avoiding my primary care, I went to urgent care, who gave me cough syrup to help me with sleep and otherwise assured me it would clear up. COVID-19 and remote work started in March, and by April, the fever came back with a vengeance. And if you remember what it was like to have COVID symptoms in April 2020, it was nerve-wracking. Nina's a clinician and was required on site throughout all of COVID, so she had to report that her husband was exhibiting symptoms. They worked me up for COVID and discovered I had pneumonia the entire time. I was treated with an antibiotic and recovered across the next few weeks. My 3-year-old was home with me during early COVID, and juggling work responsibilities and childcare was very challenging. From March to June, I was some of the most negligent with my diet I had ever been, as I think a lot of people were during lockdowns. But by June 2020, Gloria was able to return to daycare, and the newfound abundance of time was extremely motivating. The remote work felt like a miracle in many ways, not to mention restaurants were closed. I knew there may never be another opportunity like this. Nina and I rid the house of crap food and did a grocery shop that, in retrospect, was the foundation for all the success that followed. For the new routine, we decided that I would skip breakfast, eat fruit, yogurt, and granola bowls for lunch, and in a more keto tradition, have steak salads for dinner, with all the dressing and cheese I wanted. The price of a weekly shop increased by about 40%, because we were buying all this extra steak. And I'll point out that Nina does not eat meat, but was kind enough to frequently cook these steaks. The fruit bowls were absolutely delicious, and I look forward all day to those steak salads. Piping hot, juicy steak strips over spinach with blue cheese crumbles and Kent Ranch with baby tomatoes and tortilla strips. I want one right now. I'll add that I specifically wasn't counting calories. I was instead trusting that these meals and these portions, and avoiding much else, would inevitably lead me to success. But I think I was probably averaging about 1,500 calories a day. One of the most embarrassing things about where I was health-wise is that I couldn't really break into a stride. I mean, I could run if my life depended on it, but honestly, not very far at all. When I was commuting, if I had to run to catch a bus, I would get lightheaded and it would be forever to recover. I was frequently calling a cab just to go from my office building to the bus station. I remember when I saw Joker in October 2019, even though he looked malnourished in his scenes as Arthur, in his later scenes as a Joker, Joaquin Phoenix looked so comfortable and flexible in his body, and I remember thinking how amazing that must feel. My first instinct was to drop some of the weight through diet and then introduce exercise later. But for years, we had this fairly expensive and largely unused true elliptical and treadmill in our basement. There was no way I'd be able to run on the treadmill, but the elliptical was rated for up to 300 pounds. With remote work, my mornings were mine again, so for a few weeks, I did a half hour a day. By June 13th, I weighed in for the first time and saw 289, and that was after 2 weeks of strict dieting. My Fitbit scale logs the weight onto the Fitbit app over the Wi-Fi, so now it was memorialized, my fattest weight ever. The food routine continued much the same. To this day, I'm not sick of the fruit, but after 2 months or so, the salads got a little tiresome. One day, Gloria's daycare was the recipient of a food donation from a local grocery, and they didn't know what to do with all the produce, so they just gave them away to parents. Nina, not having a better use for them, made a veggie soup. Veggie soup at any other point in my life would not be my go-to meal. But the beauty of detoxing off of bad food is that new, healthier cravings emerge, and suddenly getting to have a nice hot bowl of veggie soup sounded like the best thing in the world. So I did soup for a while, then roast beef sandwiches, then I transitioned back to salads, swapped steak with chicken, did flatbread pizza, and on and on. Taking another cue from keto, every week I would buy a block of cheese, which I would snack on throughout the day, often with red grapes. Cheese, I think we all know, isn't the healthiest food in the world, but snacking on fatty foods is considerably more filling than snacking on carby foods, so you're not nearly as tempted to keep going back for more and more and more and more. But you might notice that between the tortilla strips, sandwiches, fruit, and starches in the soups, I wasn't zero carb by any means. I leaned away from carbs without being scared of them. That's probably the best way to describe it.
Because you need carbohydrates for the brain to function.
The results came faster than I expected. I stopped snoring almost immediately. I no longer experienced heartburn. The sheer relief of knowing I was moving in a good direction isn't to be underestimated either. By August, I had lost 30 pounds, which is when it started to become real. I knew I wanted to lose at least 100 pounds, but I also knew that at 5'6", 189 pounds was still too big. BMI has gotten a bad reputation because it doesn't account for every body type and every fitness goal, but as a generic standard, I think you could do worse. And my BMI suggested I should be 154 to be in a normal weight range. So I aimed for 150. I had been through this enough to know that calories in and calories out was a proven pathway to weight loss, and I knew that exercise was incredibly important, but I still underestimated the positive impact exercise would have on me at that weight. I went from not being able to break into a stride to a guy who was exercising a half an hour a day, which was a massive confidence boost. And after a few weeks, I wondered, could I fit in another half hour during my lunch hour? Normally, the reason people don't hit the gym during their lunch break is because of the logistics of laundry and showering and getting back to work on time. But I was remote and had a home gym in my basement. I kept the laundry situation very efficient. I just wore fitness shorts and sandals while on the elliptical, so I didn't even have to cycle through sweaty socks. Hitting the elliptical twice a day with no days off made a huge difference for me. I went from active to very active with that decision. I have a TV with a Roku, and with YouTube and Disney Plus and Plex at your fingertips, it was this golden opportunity to consume media. And if I was urgently needed at work, I had my phone at the ready and could hop off. The elliptical, which I still use, is a true XM30 elliptical. The generic workout when you press start is 30 minutes. It has some fancy presets that I've never explored. I just set the resistance to 10 and go. I always aim to burn 400 calories in a half hour, either by picking up the pace or by making up for the difference when the 30 minutes is up. Depending on how I slept or what state I was in, some days it was all I could muster to just complete the workout. But other days I felt great, and I would try to get a record speed for the half hour. Before I started the new healthy routine, I would often get phantom headaches or feel kind of sickly. I still find that pounding out a half hour on the elliptical is a remedy for most transient physical ailments like these, including anxiety. And for me, working out in the middle of a workday is very helpful for my temperament, as it takes me away from the heat of whichever conflict or problem I was trying to solve in that moment. It makes me less impulsive. In just a couple of months, I went from someone who physically couldn't work out to someone who depended on fitness, as important a routine as brushing my teeth. When we had our baby, Nina had lost her opportunities to run for a few years, which had been depressing her. But now that I was remote, when she came home at 5, I'd tag her in and she started doing the elliptical or running for an hour as well. And she shed about 12 pounds that she had been looking to get rid of since Gloria was born. I can't really overstate the positive impact that reintroducing fitness had to both of our lives. I'll add that having lost weight with just diet in the past, I'm convinced that persistent, intense exercise throughout the loss shaped my body, mitigated loose skin, and made me look healthier faster. I received a lot of, "you look healthier and different" type comments after only having lost like 15 or 20 pounds. By the time I was down to 260, I made my first awkward attempt to go for a run, which was in the height of summer heat. This is too big to run, frankly. You run too high of a risk of injury, and there's less fitness benefit as you won't be able to run long enough to burn meaningful calories. But I did manage to run an 11-minute mile or so, which was yet another psychological boost, enough to know you can't run yet, but you're going to be able to soon.
Are you awake, Daddy? Are you awake?
I'm all right. Aww. I think when we first set out on a massive fitness goal, there's a tendency to be too focused on the final goal, like wanting to fast forward to that point in time when you've already lost the 100 pounds.
So what's the next goal? You can only go...
I want to lose another 80 pounds. That's the goal. And I think I can do that by July. But consider the first 10 felt really good. Better than you think. If you've done it before, better than you remember. The next 10 feel awesome too, and on and on. And the benefits of good nutrition, sleep, hydrating, and exercise are profound, even with minimal weight loss. The point is, if you have a very ambitious long-term goal and find it overwhelming, don't underestimate the power of the small improvements. But on the complete flip side of that, if you have a lot of work to do on your fitness, don't lower your long-term ambitions. My advice is to keep focused on both your long and short-term goals. You need, for instance, a weight you want to be in a year, and to achieve that, you need to know the rate you expect to lose in a month. In Shawshank Redemption, they say all it took for Andy Dufresne to break out of prison was pressure and time.
Geology is the study of pressure and time. That's all it takes, really. Pressure and time.
Pressure and time is the name of the game with massive weight loss goals. Pressure meaning weighing yourself every day, making good decisions every day, getting immediately back on track if you don't, and adhering to a fitness regimen. And time meaning you're gonna have to do that consistently for a long time. Certainly more than a year for a massive weight loss, and frankly, a form of it for the rest of your life. Time is a necessary ingredient, so starting now is better than starting later. So that's how it went for months. My wedding ring fit again, After a while, my smart scale stopped recognizing me as Frankie, and to this day, I'm guessed as I became unrecognizable to it. I was working out as though I wasn't dieting, and I was dieting as though I wasn't working out. But my energy was great, probably because I was sleeping better. I was gaining a lot more physical comfort. For instance, even though I hadn't been doing much in terms of building my upper body strength, lifting heavy things was far easier because I wasn't lifting my own weight. One of the worst things about being big was foot pain. After a day of shooting boxmac, for instance, my feet would ache, sometimes for 24 hours. I go into shoots dreading that inevitable after effect, as I'm sure John did.
My tootsies, my doggies are
It's your feet.
screaming.
I lost about 20 pounds my first month and averaged about 10 from that point on. I was working remotely, and weight loss, even that fast, doesn't read as well on Zoom, which was a huge plus for me, actually. I've embarked on enough efforts like these to know how much notice people around you take, along with unwanted advice and the inevitable embarrassment if you fail. I know there are a lot of programs like Noom and WW, both of which I considered throwing money at before reminding myself it was just pressure and time, that try to aid in the behavioral improvements required for weight loss by creating support systems that hold one another to account. I found it helpful this time around to treat the effort as a private matter that required only my own commitment and intrinsic motivation, which are foundational. If I required someone looking over my shoulder or telling me I look better or to keep it up or any kind of external cheerleading, I knew I was going to fail. That stuff is all nice, but I think it needs to be non-essential. I actually took down a note in my iPhone titled "Look, Fat," enumerating in detail all of the negative aspects of being overweight.
Look, Fat, look, here's the deal.
Many of you know it's actually easy to adapt to being fat and just kind of live with it and be shocked by how much better you feel. You can even learn this and forget it and relearn it, as I've had to do many times. With so much time on the elliptical, I spent some of it watching fitness-based content. Men's Health has a series called Gym and Fridge, which describes the routines and diets of in-shape celebrities, which I found helpful. Schwarzenegger, you probably won't be surprised to hear, had a lot to say on the matter. Something that stuck with me is when he said,
"The key thing is always to remember that for every calorie you take in, you got to burn it off. There's no one else that's going to do it for you. You got to do it."
His advice on bodybuilding I also found applicable to any fitness goal. He talks a lot about shocking the muscle.
Sometimes the body will hit a wall. The body is saying, look, I know all your tricks. I know you're going to start first with bench press. And then I know you're going to walk over to the chin-up bar. So you have to go and use the shocking principle. I'm going to go and start now with 315. And I'm going to do 20 reps with 315. And let's see if the pectoral muscle is used to that.
He's also a big goals guy. And I believe creating strong, well-defined goals that you focus on is the whole key.
See, if you don't have a vision of where you go, and if you don't have a goal where you go, you drift around and you never end up anywhere.
And his goals are all intrinsic. They're not based on what anyone else does or has done.
I'm going to do it and I'm going to show it to them. Maybe it has never been done before. That's perfectly fine with me.
Madman ultrathoner David Goggins is very similar in that regard.
What you say to yourself is important. There's no coach, there's no trainer to keep you going, it's only you.
Ethan Suplee, who many know from Boy Meets World and Remember the Titans and Mallrats, was 550 and has been on a roller coaster of gains and losses for 20 years. And he had a lot of good insights. There are a lot of weight loss YouTube channels that get really deep into the science of ketosis and fat burning, and a lot of that goes over my head, and I don't find it especially helpful, personally. And too much of it feels too speculative or experimental.
The body still managed to find homeostasis with its minerals, with the exception of magnesium.
And this is where the majority of our ATP comes from. These things turn 150 revolutions per second.
The urine test strips measure what is called acetoacetate. Okay, that is a ketone body, but they only measure the excess ketones.
And that's called reverse electron transport. And when you have reverse electron transport, it ends up popping off a free radical, a superoxide in this case.
I have found it helpful to learn about popular weight loss methods like fasting and keto and incorporate them into something that works for me. Each has their own wisdom, and you can borrow and take your own risks without joining any particular cult. Metal Jesus Rocks, a gaming YouTuber, has been struggling with weight loss, and he turned me onto Ring Fit Adventure, a fitness RPG for Switch, which is actually really fun and a great $80 alternative if you can't afford a machine. Something that stuck with me about Metal Jesus was how open and forward he was at the beginning of his journey.
Everyone had to stay home, and of course I added some poundage on. Man, yeah, I kind of let myself go a little bit.
I have to say, I might have been capable of some self-deprecating jokes, but I was a lot more embarrassed and affected by mean YouTube comments than he clearly is. Even now, one of the hardest things is having a huge backlog of videos memorializing all this time I was unhealthy. It feels great to have overcome that, but the mistake still looms large. But still, I think there's a tendency to distance or demonize one's former self, like, what an unhealthy idiot that guy was. That's something I really don't want to do. Fat Frankie was doing his best. And in all non-health related ways, I'm the same guy, so I think that would be a really unhealthy outlook. Since I knew I would be dropping sizes rapidly and the majority of my exercise was in private, I tried to ride out a few pairs of oversized basketball shorts for way too long. If you're big, you're gonna chafe. I don't know where or how, but you will. But one of the many things you can do to mitigate that is wear fitness clothing that isn't too small or too big. It's a little bit of an investment, but you're going to be working out a lot and you don't want horrible chafing to ruin it. I highly recommend sweat-wicking underwear like the Nike ones. My favorite story to have come out of this whole thing is back in 2016 when I was plenty big, I bought 4 pairs of dress pants from the Kohl's online store. I hate buying pants because I have a short leg, like a 28, and at the time a large waist, so I was trying to find something go-to that I could rely on. These Kohl's pants came in and they didn't fit whatsoever. They stayed in a bag in my closet for 4 years. At first, I didn't return them because I was under the delusion that I'd lose weight. And as time went on, they just caused me dread. After the holidays in 2020, I did my first clothing purge, and I was hopeful this would be the triumphant moment the Kohl's pants finally fit. Well, they were way too huge. I also had a ton of Red Cow merch from TeePublic, all of which was 2X, and I'm now a men's small. I was going to donate it, but Red Cow superfan Amy Sater Brown, who has had her own incredible and inspiring weight loss journey, asked if I could send the shirts so she could make a quilt. So now all of my former merch, which includes the charcoal sweatshirt I wore in probably 100 videos, is part of a transformative work of art. Because I increased the number of showers per day, I started buying massive bottles of shampoo from Amazon, so I wasn't in a constant state of having to stock it. I must confess, I haven't given up diet soda. I'm not here to defend it, I don't think I could possibly, but maybe it's helpful to know that I drank a lot of Diet Mountain Dew throughout the entire process, and at the very least, it didn't inhibit my results in any way. To be honest, I kind of used it as a go-to treat to help me get through hunger from time to time. I'm not horrified of a treat every now and then either. I just don't stock them in the house. I'm not a smartwatch guy, at least not yet. For runs, I just use my phone's GPS to track distance and use a $10 Bluetooth headphones from Walmart. But again, I do rely on the Fitbit app to log my weigh-ins so I can track trends over time to analyze the rate of loss. I'm a huge believer in weighing yourself frequently. Some people dissuade that, thinking that small, meaningless fluctuations will dissuade you, but I think it's important to have your weight be top of mind. I think a discouraging weigh-in once a week would be a bigger blow to motivation than micromanaging daily weigh-ins, even if some weigh-ins are misnomers. Anything else these apps and devices track, like steps or heart rate, I don't find particularly helpful or meaningful. By the time I had lost 70 pounds or so, my body went through a period, maybe 2 or 3 months, where it struggled to regulate my temperature properly. Especially in the evenings, I would get very, very cold, and I would use these microwave heat pads to warm myself up, but kind of like when you have a fever, I'd make myself too hot. This is a metabolic thing, where your body thinks you're starving and is trying to hold on to calories, and it's normal and it will go away.
How the hell are you wearing that hoodie? It's warm, but it's not that hot. I freeze all the time.
You freeze?
I freeze every day.
John freezes. News to
Ever
me.
since I lost weight.
As a funny side note, I broke my tailbone in 2009 and I don't think it healed right, but the extra padding from the weight gain mitigated the pain for all these years. Now, with little padding, the pain has been awful, so that's something I'll have to address at some point. I've returned to the doctor, I'm happy to say. I work out every day, no recovery days. At minimum, I did an hour in the morning and an hour in the afternoon, but when time is permitted, I've sometimes done 3-hour days. With nicer weather, I often substitute one of the hours with running a 10K, or on the weekends, I'll run 10 to 13 miles. For at least 8 months now, I burn upwards of 2,000 calories a day from exercise alone. All this persistent conditioning has resulted in me having incredible cardiovascular endurance, unlike I've ever had. Recovery days, in my opinion, make sense if you're doing high-impact exercise, but if you do high-impact more sparingly, but make sure to always at least get in low impact, you're going to ensure exercise remains front and center in your life without risking exhaustion or injury. And with an elliptical, you never have to worry about the weather. I'll add that for me, if I hit the elliptical as hard as I can for a half hour, I can really only burn 500 calories or so. but 2 hours at a moderate or even slow pace will burn up to 1,600 calories. So I choose more minutes over more intensity every time. If you do want to introduce some running after a while, consider experimenting with low distance, like a mile, then experiment with more intensity at that same low distance. This way you're able to build speed as you build distance, and you'll more slowly add strain on your leg muscles. I got tight calves for the first few months I ran, partially because I was still too big, but also because the elliptical just wasn't working my calves. My damn calf sees all the way up.
Something was happening, yeah.
Anytime we had to go up and down a sidewalk or anything, it stung. If you feel tightness like that, stop running, return to low impact exercise, and try again after a week or two. The real tragedy would be if an injury prevents you from doing low impact fitness. Protect that at all costs. After a lot of conditioning and weight loss, I found that fasting was less effective and my appetite was way up, obviously. I've read that fasting is a lot more effective when you have a lot of weight to lose. Just finished a 90-degree day. And those suck. In terms of who to listen to, I would listen to whoever's done the thing you're trying to do. If you have 100 pounds to lose, listen to people who have lost a lot of weight, not to marathoners and elite cyclists who have never had a weight problem. And if you really want to get into shape and want to refine your fitness, listen to people who are in shape. One other interesting note is, at this point, I still have a little bit of body dysmorphia where I unconsciously regard myself as a bigger person. Like I don't feel as loose as Joaquin Phoenix just yet. Or I feel like I still take up space, or at the very least, I definitely don't think I'm skinny. But I think I might be. Now I know what you're thinking. Frankie, how can we inspire John to do the same? I'm very happy to report that since March 2021, John has been extremely committed to his own goals and has already lost a significant amount of weight. We've been doing weekly mile walks together, for which he's holding up great, and he has also embraced some fasting with keto principles and is doing excellent. I'm sure in the future he and I will have to do some joint health-based content. We have a few ideas for some fun box max. So having established that I've lost weight in the past and put it back on, the inevitable question is, how do I intend to keep this off for life? In terms of routine, I think requiring a daily weigh-in and daily fitness is a must. But to stay engaged, I'm a very goal-oriented person by nature, so I think developing new fitness goals over time is a good strategy. I want to improve my flexibility and posture, I want to build muscle, I want to join local road races, and if I may be so bold, perhaps win one or two. I once heard something about how if you keep the weight off for 2 years, you're statistically more likely to keep it off for longer. So I suppose that's a reasonable short-term goal, to maintain this weight until summer 2023. But regarding statistics, there's a really cool Sherlock Holmes quote. While the individual man is an insoluble puzzle, in the aggregate, he becomes a mathematical certainty. You can, for example, never foretell what any one man will do, but you can, with precision, say what an average man will do. In other words, stats about how most people gain their weight back or most people fail in this way or that way don't have to apply to you as an individual if you're committed to your goal. If I could impart one insight, it would be that I've found it easy to lose weight, but very hard to decide to lose weight. And I mean decide, not experiment or flirt or try. Do or do not. There is no try. I'm talking about the kind of commitment that can't be interfered with by any bad advice or insensitive comment or invalidating remark or momentary setback. Simply unrelenting motivation to do what you know is going to make you better. Years back, I read The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, and he asks you to identify the one thing in your life that, if you improved, would have the maximum positive impact. I knew then that for me, that was to get healthy. And if you can actually put your finger on that thing, don't you owe it to yourself to do it? It's just a simple question of what you're willing to sacrifice to get it. I don't exaggerate when I say that this change has made every second of every day of my life happier. This has obviously been a really personal video, so my sincere thanks if you've watched to the end. And if you're like me and you know you've got to do something about your weight or anything else in your life that's acting as a perpetual obstacle, now is when to start applying that pressure and that time.